Good morning, everybody. My name is David Garcia. I hope everybody's enjoying the conference so far, like I am. Paul always does such a fantastic job. I would like to introduce my friend and next speaker, Sergeant Clifford Stone. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Clifford in the past, and I've been to his house a couple times, and he's a very, very nice man. I felt honored when Paula asked me to introduce him for this historic event. He is one of the most genuine and caring people you'll ever meet. He is a hero, and his story when he was in the Army is truly remarkable, and it's the truth. Clifford will be interviewed by Grant Cameron, my other friend, who is the recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress International Researcher of the Year. I was with Grant and Paula Harris a few months ago on beautiful Mount Shasta, and I was an eyewitness of the Apunian craft that flashed over us at the exact time Ricardo Gonzalez said it would. It was a program sighting. I witnessed the craft materialize and dematerialize after the multiple flashes that we received. So without further ado, please enjoy this interview. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Clifford. It's an honor to get a chance to interview you, and just to let you know, we probably have 100 questions, so you probably have to talk as fast as I do to get through.
Well, be careful. They couldn't find the real Clifford Stone, so they sent me in. I'm the droid.
So that story's true then. Okay, so let's maybe start with your book. I saw you were sitting outside. Do you have any books left?
No, sir, I don't, regrettably.
Can you describe your book so that people can know what they're missing or how to get hold of your book?
Yes. The book is covering many events in my life as to what I did as far as how I got started, even believing in UFOs, when I got in the military, what I did concerning UFOs, all the way up to the present a couple years ago. So it's pretty modern about the events that took place in my life. I'd like to add that I started to write the book back in actually '94. I had a death of my 18-year-old son in a motorcycle accident in '95, and the project just dropped. Had it not been for a very valiant effort on the part of Paula Harris, that book would not be out there, and I'm glad she went ahead and kept pushing me and kept saying, okay, no, we need to get this done, we need to get this done, we need to get this done. And the reason I'm glad of that, I got one phone call. The one phone call was from a man who was with me on a crash site. He told us only one time was he ever involved in an incident. He talked to his family about it. The family thought he was crazy. One day I got a call from that man. That man didn't want to change his life. He wanted to be normal, but he wanted his family to know he was telling the truth. That one phone call convinced his family that all this time that he'd been telling it, and they didn't believe him, they now knew he was telling the truth. So if for no other reason, that book served a valiant purpose for that one person. But I hope people who have read it, that they understand the message behind it, and it's helped others as well. It talks about my first contact when I was a young kid, the first UFO sighting I had. It even talks about how our visitors helped me to visit my son. here it is, they have the ability to transverse time and space, then surely they could take me back 15 minutes before the accident. Reasons that they don't go ahead and change anything from our past or anything in our future. We have to change things within our present, what they call our present now. But, hey, I asked, let me go back 15 minutes before the accident, and they said no. And after some consideration, they said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and let you visit with your son. It's in the book, and I don't want to get too emotional by telling the story, but it's there, and if you go on my Facebook page and go back a couple of years, you'll find this story there also.
Okay, so the book is called?
It's called the Clifford Stone story and the story of UFO crash retrievals.
And because you're sold out, did you make the $1 million that everybody thinks we make in ufology?
Oh, no, sir. I'll tell you right now, 10% before anything is spent goes, and I'm Catholic, and there's a order of Catholic sisters there in Roswell that I'm close to, and I have a covenant that 10% goes there first. Then I go ahead and reinvest most of what I get back into my research, because the research is not cheap, and if you don't have the money and they go ahead and say, oh, you know, in order to get these documents, you're going to have to pay X number of dollars, or if you have to file an appeal, things of this sort, and also equipment. Like right now, I'm going to have to be buying a new computer and a new printer. The situation is that when I started to get some of the documents I recently got, which I was fighting to get for a long time, I've always said that, you know, in the past, disclosure almost happened. In '52, it came real close to happening. The documents that prove that were not released until November and December of 2016 and January of 2017 by the Central Intelligence Agency. The problem was they were not put in any specific UFO files that they have. They have two files, UFOs Fact and Fiction and the UFO Collection. You won't find those documents in there. You will find them in the CIA General Records files that had been reviewed by CREST and permitted to be made into what we call portable files. But they are among a part of more than 17 million documents. So if you don't know where to look, what to ask for, you're not going to find those documents. And I want to get those, and I hope those get out to a lot of people, because you're going to get to see what really happened in '52 that almost brought it to the point where we wouldn't be having these meetings now, because by the end of ∞53, we would have known the truth. UFOs are real, they are of extraterrestrial and even multidimensional realities with a highly advanced technology far above them, the intelligence that we are currently at. And we have a whole lot that we can learn, but you know what? They have a whole lot they can learn from us, and that's one of the reasons some of the contact by them is going on, up to and including the abductions.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting into documents, but first I want to ask you about your background. Can you just go through your military record? You came in, you go out, like what's the dates we're talking here?
I went into the military on July the 8th, 1969. I went ahead and retired after a long fight for them to let me go ahead and retire in January of 1990. I spent 22 and a half years in the military. They initially found me as being medically rejected from military service. I really wanted to go and serve in the military, but what happened? They went ahead and said I was medically rejected and I couldn't get in. And I wanted to go in the Air Force because my brother is in the Air Force. Well, as fate would have it, when I graduated and went back home to my hometown, I got a letter from the draft board that said, "Greetings and salutations from your friends and neighbors." They wanted me to go back for a reevaluation there at the Ashland, what we call the Ashland AFI station, which is the Armed Forces Examination Station. There they went ahead, gave me my written test and everything all over again. I passed those with flying colors, but I still had problems with medical. There was a person that was a colonel that was visiting from Walter Reed Hospital. He told the captain that was doing the medical examinations there, go ahead, take his family to Camden Park, which is a amusement park that's in Huntington, West Virginia at the time, and that he would finish up the rest of the medicals. When I got in there, he said, "Well, do you really want in?" I said, "Yes, sir, I really want in." He says, "Okay." He says, "Listen, all I can do is get you into the Army and get you in as a clerk." Well, hey, I wanted to do something in the military. I wanted to go in under what they called the Warrant Officers Aviation Flight Program. Well, I can't do that because that requires a flight physical. If I get a flight physical, then I'm back out again. So I'm stuck. But I wanted to get in, and I figured, okay, I can do things after I get in there. And I went ahead, I enlisted, was signed up for being a clerk typist. I'm on my way to the Army, go to AIT, everything goes good. Then on the first time I had exposure to some officers having training in UFO recoveries there at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, not knowing really what was going on. I went through intensified debriefing as to what did you see, what did you see. I eventually went ahead, was returned to my unit after 4 nights and 5 days of that intensified debriefing. They went ahead and told me, called me down to my first sergeant's office, which first sergeant wasn't there. There were the 2 men, which I always called my terrorists, that did the intensified debriefing, said, "Okay, here's the situation. You have 1 or 2 choices. You can join us and help us go ahead and get the truth out there." And in the end of 1969, it's coming out. You know, steps are already on the way. And of course, they're talking about the Condon Committee report. And I said, "Well, you know, that'd be great, and I'd really like to be a part of it. But, you know, let me think about it." I said, "Oh, okay. You know, come back Monday, let us know if you want to re-enlist or not." Well, by this time, other things had happened in my life in the military, and I wasn't real sure I wanted to make a career of it. So I says, "Well, let me think," because one of the catches to it, I had to re-enlist for 3 more years. Then they went ahead and told me that you have 1 or 2 choices. Either go ahead and join us, or we have to court-martial you. And I'm thinking, court-martial, what did I do? They go ahead and say, "Oh, well, you know, you enlisted in the Air Force, and you wasted all this taxpayers' money taking the training in the Army and being in the Army. So, you know, we can't just let you go and walk among the people in the streets. You violated the law. We got a war going on, even though it's undeclared. And you were supposed to be in the Air Force, and you're here in the United States Army. You should have understood that." If you see my first DD Form 4, which is the enlistment contract, you'll see I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. Needless to say, on Monday, I went back and I re-enlisted, at which time they administratively changed that DD Form 4, reflecting that I was in the Army. There's a much more story, but that's in the book also, of the involvement of how I got there. But from there on in, anytime they had a UFO situation and I was assigned close by, I would be called into it.
Okay, now one thing I always wondered about you is you leave the Army and you end up in Roswell. Did you know there was a crash in Roswell? And why did you end up living in Roswell?
Oh, I knew there was a crash in Roswell, but I wasn't putting the 2 and 2 together. I went ahead and I was at Keesler Air Force Base, and I was the Army Detachment Administrative Non-Commissioned Officer. And it was for the TSOC course. By the way, the officers that went to the TSOC course, they were actually the same people. After it was a 9-month course, and in the 9th month they were sent for a week in Washington, and the NSA had their pick of those people. And I'm not going to tell you that there at Keesler, at the 33rd and 80th Training Squadron, they also learned how to do retrieval of space objects that have fallen to Earth. I can't tell you that, so remember, I can't tell you that right there. But I was there, and I got there after I got back from Germany, and they wanted volunteers to go ahead and go to the multinational observers course in the Cyanide. Well, I thought, okay, I'm getting closer. I'm going to have to go back overseas anyhow, so I put in for it. I got a call from the Pentagon saying, oh, you haven't been back in the States long enough. Huh? I know people, it was in ADA, they got back, they were less than a year, and they were sent back to Korea. So I figured, okay, you know, I've been here over 2 years. You guys are eventually going to send me there. Oh, no. We are going to go ahead and reassign you in the U.S. By the way, you're going to Roswell Air Force, or you're going to Roswell. So I go ahead and think, Roswell, okay. What's at Roswell? We don't know. Okay, you're sending me to Roswell, and you don't know what I'm going to be doing there? And they couldn't tell me what I was going to be doing there. Now, the Air Force personnel that I was working with, they came and said, well, you know, they used to have an old air base there. They used to have what they called Walker Air Force Base, but in March of 1967, it closed down because, you know, the city had the wrong politics. I said, oh? And I said, then what else is? We don't know. Well, most of the time when you get an ROTC assignment, the professor of military science, which is normally a field grade officer, active duty field grade officer, he has a choice of the personnel he wants. So they sent him 4 or 5 candidates. Well, the poor PMS that was there, he didn't have a choice. I was coming into discussion. And the other thing that had been hard pressed, after you make E6, you're supposed to have a full-length photograph in your official military files. It's not a choice. It's a requirement by regulation. I took photographs, but guess what, folks? None of those photographs ever made it to my 201 file. There were a lot of things that were left out of my 201 file that he wouldn't even know about. And my involvement and interest in UFOs, that definitely wasn't going to be made part of my military record. When I got there, it wasn't too awful long, I was contacted by an individual that somehow, some way knew of my interest in UFOs. And actually, one of the first books that they wanted me to take a look at was the book entitled The Roswell Crash by Bill Moore. Well, I wasn't going to go out and buy it. I didn't really want to be involved in the UFOs. I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is the place. This is where they actually had the crash. I remember that we had discussions about this, but that was in 47. What's going on now? Well, what was going on now was that now they were about to go ahead and start talking about what happened in 47. About the crash in 47. And if you're ever involved in a recovery of a UFO and then you were told you can't talk about it, then if you're used as a scapegoat, as Major Marcel was, he had to sit out there with the debris of a weather balloon that he knew full well that it was a weather balloon and hold it up. And if you see the pictures, please note he's not smiling. Boy, the joke's on me. I went out there and I thought we had strange material, and it was nothing more than a weather balloon. He knew better than that. And he thought, why are these people crucifying me like this? Well, he was angry, but no one listened to him. No one listened to Jesse Marcel until Stanton Friedman talked to him and ran into him quite by accident because he was giving a radio interview at the location where Marcel lived. Marcel was more than happy to tell him the story.
Okay, so the story. Let's go to your story. A lot of people think they think about crashes. You were involved in 12, correct? So let's go through one crash. What happens? You get a phone call. Can you go step by step as to what happens?
When there was an incident that I was going to be called into, I would wind up getting a visit or a call. If I, forgive me, this is hard. I try to avoid it.
Okay.
But I'd get a call, or I'd have them come get me at the door. And I don't care what you're doing. You go. Bottom line, you have, nothing more to do. You go. I'd get a call, or I would go ahead and get a tap at the door, and the code word would be code word Tabasco. The general sends his regards. We had what we called a BA-50 bag, and there's a reason they called it a BA-50 bag. That's what the Air Force called their equipment that they would take with them. I was Army, but it was still the BA-50 bag. Well, I'd grab my BA-50 bag, and I would normally have a vehicle pick me up. They'd take us to a staging area, and from the staging area, we'd go from there.
So how many people are in this staging area? So this is all the different military there gathered with
Well,
you?
you would have selected individuals there, and it would probably be anywhere from 20 to 30 people. And I'd never been in any situation where there were more than 30 people. But you'd have two teams, an A team and a B team. The A team had to arrive within 2 hours of
And you're on
an
the
event
A
happening.
team? Are you on the A team?
I could be on the A team or B team, because both of them were made of the same type of people. Now, you might think, okay, 30, 60 people, what if they needed more? They could draw on the resources of the nearest military installation for any additional military personnel that they needed. They wouldn't necessarily brief those personnel when they went in, but when they left, they would go ahead and debrief them. And I'm sure all of you have heard about people saying that they had to sign non-disclosure agreements. Well, they did. And most people in the military will tell you, well, that right there is a standard military form if you had a security clearance. And you do not have to say that, you never signed it, because that's not classified. Not true. When it came to UFOs, just like with people who were involved in SCI programs, the document, the mere existence of that document is classified within itself, even before it's filled out. For example, for Talent Kehoe within the National Reconnaissance Organization, the non-disclosure agreement, before anything else was put onto it, was classified secret. And once it was filled out, it could go top secret with as many as 11 code words after it. When that happened, you wasn't supposed to talk about anything that you were exposed to thereafter. And you know what was really weird? You didn't know what you were going to be exposed to, but you agreed to be exposed to it by signing that form. And with the UFO situation, it's the same thing. Within a compartment, a sensitive compartmented information program, or a special access program, a lot of people think, well, if you're cleared for, say, blue sky, okay, and that's the code word for a special access program or sensitive compartmented information, well, you're cleared for all of that. No, you're not. Within those two things, SAPS or SCI, you have levels of information that you're privy to, and they'll tell you, well, unless you're doing certain things, those things that you're doing that you have a specific need to know, that's all you're going to have exposure to.
Okay, so you've got the need to know. So you arrive at a marshalling area, and then what do they fly you in to a helicopter? You into the site?
It depends on what they need for you to go in there. Whether they need to fly you in, they flew us in. They flew us all the way from, in one incident, all the way from Virginia, saying we were going on an FTX in Florida. When we landed there at Oakland Air Terminal, we knew we wasn't going to Florida. Later on, we flew into an area, and when we looked down, we saw all these fires down below. And, of course, we were wondering where we were going. Well, we wasn't being told where we were going. We were told to go ahead and take off our name tags, our affiliation with any type of military organization, take off our patches, take off our combat patches, take off our unit patches, put our wallets and anything personal we had, up to and including our dog tags, into a little plastic bag they gave us. They had a little piece of tape. We wrote our name on it. That stayed on the plane, a commercial airliner.
Okay.
It stayed there. When we landed, we were immediately taken from where we landed over to, I think it was 2 helicopters that we were using on this one. Got on the helicopter, and they flew us to our location. And to the best of my recollection, it took about 45 minutes for us to get there.
Okay, are people talking among themselves in the helicopters to what's going to happen?
No, they didn't want you to talk, period. When we landed, and one guy says, you know, I'll kiss your hindsight if this is in Oakland. Well, I didn't know. I'd never been to Oakland. But the guy that I always knew as a colonel who was in charge of these operations I was involved in, he pulled his .45 out and he says, the next person that opens their mouth, I swear to God, I will shoot.
Wow.
So
That's serious.
Very simple. It was very quiet from there on in. We had one MP that we were close to, and I asked him, you're a military policeman, can you do it? Shut up, Stoney, shut up.
Wow.
So we went ahead, when we got there, we got out, and that was where we recovered a B-52 that went down. And there's a lot of stories, and several people have told several different...
Okay, but let's do a UFO one. So you get...
This actually did involve
the UFO?
UFOs.
Okay, so describe, you know what your job is? Like what you're going to do, or does somebody give you orders?
I'm supposed to be NBC. I'm supposed to go out there, take Geiger counter readings, things of this sort. But I already knew when we got there that, you know, it might be something like we are recovering something of a UFO. Now, remember, I've already seen our alien visitors, living and dead. I already had contact with the one that was going to follow me throughout my life, Corona. When we landed there and we went over to where the crash site was, I always thought a B-52 was much bigger than what we saw sitting there. But it was like the whole plane was picked up by a giant hand and put there at the bottom of the jungle.
This is Vietnam.
This is in Vietnam. Right. We looked up, you know, none of the trees were destroyed like they should have been if it came in. Yeah. The B-52 wasn't in 100,000 pieces.
Okay.
So I'm going ahead. I remember I had my M16 up like this. I'm going around looking at the B-52 down there. We get to the back. When I get to the back, there are these little, typical gray guys. And
do you see them, or does everybody see these grays?
I'm the first one to see them.
Okay, but does everybody else?
Eventually, everyone else gets to go ahead and have the privilege of seeing them too. But I go around and I'm looking, and you know, I can't explain why I did this, but I immediately brought my M16 down and started to shoot. But prior to me starting to shoot, the one that came out was looking me dead in the eye, and I'm looking at him in shock. And I even know how he even said it. It was, Clifford, what are you doing here? Yeah. You're not supposed to be here. And that was meant personally for me. In short, I wasn't supposed to be in the military. They did not mean for me to be in the military. Okay. But I brought the gun down, and I'm sorry, I better say weapon. In the military, you don't never call your weapon a gun. But I brought my weapon down, I started firing. I'm backing off, and I'm yelling, VC, VC, VC. And as I back off, the other people see them, they start shooting. We start running back. Our visitors are following us, but you know what? Our bullets don't have any effect on them. And you hear where you hit them with the bullets, it knocks them down, they get back up, like in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. I actually believe that something was happening to our bullets, that we were not hitting them at all, because they kept coming, not running after us, but walking. Mm-hmm. We went ahead, we had a staging area on the other side of this little stream. We crossed it, got to that staging area. We were wondering if the helicopters were going to come and pick us up. And of course, no, they weren't. If anything was going on, we were going to have to walk out of there. So we're wondering, okay, we're stuck here. But, you know, our visitors wasn't following us anymore. The guy I always called the colonel. He says, Stone, do you know where we're at? I said, sir, I'll tell you this much, we're not in Kansas anymore. So he goes ahead and he says, okay, I need a volunteer to go back over there and see what's going on. Remember, those are our troops on that plane. Some of them may need help. Well, when we went back, all of them were dead, but not killed by our visitors. What brought that aircraft down, it was on a mission over North Vietnam and got hit. And now I know where we were. It was, in fact, Cambodia, a place known as Parrots Peak region. But no one is going to volunteer to go back there. And I went ahead and I got my M16 without saying a word. I started to go back across the little, it was a river, but I mean, it was only about halfway up my leg to my knee. And the colonel says, where are you going, Stoney? And I said, sir, I got to know what's going on over there. I got to know what's happening. He went ahead and asked me, he says, we need to send another person. I said, don't you get somebody else want to go? Have at it. And he turned around again and says, I need a volunteer. And I said, see, sir, you don't have a volunteer. But I need to know. I don't know why I need to know, but I need to know, so I started to go. But I don't want any of you people to think that those other guys that was with me were cowards. Because without any hesitation, without being asked, they grabbed their equipment, and I wasn't walking over there alone. Immediately behind me were these people, these soldiers, who knew that that weapon they had, if we run into our visitors again or whatever it was we ran into, those weapons wasn't going to be any good. But they were coming with me. Okay. The interesting thing, the guy I always called the colonel, who really knew what was going on, yeah, he said he had no choice but to join us. But he was standing there by himself on the other side of the little stream. And they followed us on in. We got back there. We cut the B-52 up into 5 sections. We cut the wings off. We cut the tail section off. So we had the wings. We had the tail section. We had the fuselage. And for some odd reason, we cut the nose section off separately. We didn't have to do that, but we did. Then we had what was called CH-54 helicopters. These are sire cranes. They're like aerial cranes that came in and picked up the pieces.
And they move it out.
And we took the whole thing out.
What about saucers? Like say, let's go through a saucer crash where a craft is there. Can you describe how they get it out of there and maybe describe what's inside the craft? Have you ever been inside the craft and wandered around? And
inside the craft, you find that it's quite interesting because a lot of times, you know, like you've heard people say that space-time is different to them than what it is with us. We would come up on a craft maybe that's 30, 35 foot in diameter. When we go inside, we find it's very huge and trying to figure out, okay, why the distortion in the apparent size of the craft on the inside.
Did they ever figure that out? I've heard that. Did they
well, we never have, but what our best guess is that you're actually dealing with a smaller craft within the three-dimensional reality that we're in. Very functional. It displaces space-time in its flight, so it doesn't have to be aerodynamically correct, but it will displace space-time in the way it flies. That, therefore, going 10,000 miles an hour, stopping on a dime, going 10,000 miles an hour, making a right-angle turn, those on the side don't even feel that because they're in a different space-time, and I hate using the word continuum because it sounds like it's something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's reality if you ever talk to anyone who's involved with quantum mechanics. It's a different space-time continuum inside the craft.
So you're in the craft, and what do you see inside the craft? Like for people who've never...
When you go inside the craft, you wind up like when we'd go in, and not all of them, this is one that I'm talking about right now, we would have a big I don't know, you could call it an auditorium, right in the center of the craft, where it was just big and vacant. And it would look like, and I'm guessing on this because I never got a chance to measure it or anything, but I'd say maybe 30, 40, 50 foot high on the inside. Now remember, it's only 30, 35 foot on the outside. Well, we go in there and we're looking, we're wondering what's going on here. But, you know, you would have openings, we'll call them doorways, into little chambers. And some of these chambers would be having places where you would have, I'm going to say cots, but they're nothing like cots. You would also have where they would have equipment that they would work that would be working with the aircraft. And
Okay, so that's control panels? Can you describe?
The control panels, like you have this table here, okay? And I know people want, and I can't say that, but there were some that probably did have where they just put their hands in there, and from there on they became part of the craft, and they could control the craft essentially with the way they would think.
Okay, so you know this for a fact, because I know this by talking to people who've claimed to have flown the craft.
I know for the fact that this is the case in
Okay.
some of the cases, but some of them were just purely, they look black like this table, okay?
Right.
Yet our visitors knew by, I don't know, sensation, whatever, where they could go ahead and move their hands to control the craft. Yeah. While you saw it was just black.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was like there was a polarization that they had where they could see it wasn't just black. There were instrumentation and everything else on it.
Yeah. Okay,
But-
so let's tie this into consciousness. So you have this idea there's these panels, and they're either running them or putting your hands on them or whatever. What's the relationship of consciousness? You're interested in, I'm interested. Why is consciousness important to the UFO phenomenon? Why should people know about it?
Well, I think the consciousness within the UFO situation is very, very important because our visitors are like children when they come to hit up on us. And with me being an interfacer, and when they choose you to be an interfacer, anything and everything they feel, all the emotions, you feel what they feel.
Like when they're crashing or...
The same thing. I mean, if they're afraid, you feel that fear. And they're not cartoon characters. When you go ahead and have a visitor that we try to say is a guest, and I was involved in a certain situation where I helped one get to where his people could take him without hurting us. His big concern was, you know, would he ever see his family again?
Yeah.
And, you know, they have families. But, you know, would he ever get to see them? Well, he knew that most of the people there that was guarding him was just as afraid as he was.
Yeah.
And he didn't want any of them to get hurt because he could identify that while he had a family he loved, we had families we loved.
Yeah. So that gets into the story. You let one go, right?
Oh, yes,
This is the
sir.
Pentagon. Can you go through that story? Where do they keep the alien in the Pentagon? How do you get involved?
Okay, this wasn't at the Pentagon.
Oh,
This was at Fort Belvoir, Virginia.
Okay. So the alien is there.
And the alien was there. They cannot talk to him.
They can't talk to
They
him? Why?
can't talk because he's not saying anything. That's why they needed to get me there.
Oh, I see. I see.
I was going to be acting as the interfacer.
Okay.
As soon as I got there, they had, you know, this little building, one level.
Okay.
It had maybe 6, 7 rooms on the inside of it.
Okay.
It was in the middle of nowhere, but it was there at Fort Meade. It had a fence around it, a security fence. You had a guard on the outside and a corridor walking up to the main entrance of the building.
Okay.
There at the main entrance, you had another guard. And then when you went through there, you had a little place where any weapons or anything that you had, any pictures, any writing material, you dropped it off there, went through another door. There's another guard, then you were directed where you were supposed to be going. But, you know, that was a lot of places to go through if you were trying to get someone out. So I got back there. When I got back there, I saw our little visitor, and he looked up at me.
And what type of being
He was in a
that we-
typical type 2 gray. Type 2 gray means
Well, how many types are there?
there were up to 3 types of grays.
Okay.
And the third type of gray isn't as small as what people think. It's normally 4.5 to 5 foot tall, just
Okay.
about like Corona was. But the type 2 is about 3.5 foot
And so
tall.
he's there sitting in a chair, or what's he
He's
standing
sitting
there?
in a chair. He's sitting in a chair down like this. I'll never forget that. Then when I step in, he goes ahead, raises real slow, looks up at me, and no one else can, he's communicating. I hate the term thought waves, but that's the only word I can use to describe. I have to use words that I can, relate
And
with.
you're able to easily communicate with him.
Real quick, and I mean, all of a sudden, he looks up and he says, "I am afraid."
Wow.
And when he says, "I am afraid," I feel every fear that little creature has.
And so what do you say back to him?
I go ahead and I said, "They're not going to harm you. And I'm here and I'm not going to let them, so don't worry." And he says, "It's not them harming me. I have a family. I miss my family. I want to see my family.
Okay.
I have children. I have that which you call a wife. I have that which you call parents. I have that which you call friends."
Yeah.
And we have that bond and we have that relationship like you also have.
Yeah.
And the situation is, if we get left behind or if we wind up becoming your prisoners, and I said, "They don't see you as a prisoner, they're calling you a guest." He says, "No, if I try to leave, they would have no hesitation to shoot me."
Wow. What year is this?
This is in 1969, towards the end of 69.
And this is this is an American crash?
This happened on American soil.
Okay. And then
And
what
it had
do
to
they
be
want you to
Virginia.
ask them? What's their intent?
They want the people who had me there wanted me to go ahead and ask him if there were more in the area where he was recovered, because there was no craft there. It was like he was left behind by accident.
Wow.
So I go ahead and try to ask him, "Do you have any of your other friends here?" He says, "No, I was left behind," because it happened on a military installation, and they didn't mean to leave him behind, but the military was getting too close. A strike team was sent out to try to find out what had went down in that area, and it wasn't a crash, it was a landing. So I go ahead and I say, "Well, they're not going to harm you." He says, "But, just like with you, if you were out and you were lost, they would have people looking for you to come to get you. My people are going to come to get me. Right. And when they come here, it's not going to be because they're trying to hurt anyone here, but by what they do to extract me from this building can have an effect where some of your people will be killed or very seriously injured. I don't want that to happen. If I stay here, they see me as a species of some animal. There will be no hesitation to take my life."
Yeah.
And people say, do an autopsy. No, we did dissections on these creatures
Okay.
because we wanted to see what they looked like internally.
Okay.
How much were they like us? How different were they than us? And it was okay, because see, the laws apply to the humans on this planet. There are no laws for our visitors.
Yeah,
So whatever
that's
we
right.
did to them, it was okay.
So you decide you're going to get him out of there.
I couldn't let that happen. I had a moral obligation to help him get out of there.
Okay, so what do you do?
So I go ahead and I tell the colonel, "Look, he's wanting to show me something, tell me something. But he's only going to do it with me here. Any other personnel here, it will not happen."
How many people are in the room?
And
Like,
I don't know exactly how many, but I know there's at least 10, 15.
is there a high ranking, like a general or?
Well, the guy that was in charge, I always called him the colonel.
Was he a colonel?
He was always in civilian clothes, so I don't know, but he acted like colonels.
So you see the
Me,
same guy
the colonel.
at most crash sites?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. You never knew who he was, though?
No, well, he went ahead and told me to call him Martin if I needed a name.
Okay.
You know the significance of Martin? Martin is the patriot saints of soldiers.
Oh, wow.
So was that really his name? I don't know.
Okay. So you tell him you want to talk to him privately.
Yes, and
Okay.
it took a little while to convince him.
Okay.
And I said, you know, the whole situation is, if you'll just step out from the gate line, or the fence line out front, get everyone else out of here, because it may cause certain things to happen that may not feel very good, and I'm right here. And he says, okay. He says, but remember, the only way out's through that door.
Okay.
I said, I know, we're not going nowhere, we're staying right here. Well, I had another friend of mine, another Spec 5, go ahead and put wire cutters real close to the fence outside. It was a storm fence. So I went out and thought, okay, I can lift the fence up and pull the wire cutters through. Well, my friend threw them over, so when I got there, where's the wire cutters for this wire? But, you know, I could see them, you know. I picked them up and we started to cut the wire. Well, by this time, they knew that we had exited the back of the building. And the door was supposed to be locked, but it wasn't locked. And now they were chasing us, and I could hear people yelling.
They're chasing you?
Yeah, the military
okay.
personnel was.
Okay.
And they were saying, you know, to stop or we'll shoot. I went ahead, got it open enough where he could get out. I held it back and told him, go on through. And he says, what happens to you? I says, that's not important. You need to get out, okay? So he got on out. When he got on out, the people behind me, and I mean, it sounded real loud. It's not all that loud, but, you know,
Yeah.
where they were locking and loading rounds in their weapons.
Wow.
And they said, stop or we'll shoot, stop or we'll shoot. At that time, I was waiting to get shot. I was thinking, okay, tonight I'm going to die.
Okay.
Tonight they have no other choice but to kill me, because I'm not going to do anything that's going to stop this little guy from getting out of here.
Okay.
But, you know, he got out. He was still concerned about me. Then all of a sudden, you didn't see the craft, but you saw this big bright light. Everything turned in day right in the area where he was at.
Wow.
And then it went out, and he was gone. Then they went ahead, came grab me, pulled me down, pushed me to the ground, and took me on back in. And the guy I always called the colonel asked me, what was I thinking of? Why did I help this creature to get away?
Creature, yeah.
And I said, you said he was our guest. He says, well, he was. I said, and we need armed guards for our guest. And he went ahead and said, you know what? You and I don't make these decisions. We follow orders. And I said, no, sir. I don't follow orders that puts other human beings in harm's way needlessly, particularly if those other human beings are innocent. He went ahead, says, that was not a human.
No.
That creature was not human.
And so what did they do to you? Did they court-martial you, or
Didn't do anything to me. My response to him was, you know, that creature is just as human as you and I, maybe more so.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to its compassion, its concern for other living things.
Exactly.
We have a whole lot we could learn from them.
And you think that we should give all the bodies back? We should give all the beings back? Is that your position?
Actually, I think most of them have been returned.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
The whole situation, they have compassion for their dead like we have compassion for our dead.
And the government's finally understood this?
And the governments well, the whole situation is that there were several times that we almost annihilated ourselves. Not because they were trying to cause it to happen, because we wanted to go ahead and use military force to take the technology that our visitors have.
Okay.
More than once.
What kind of technology have we tried to use against them? Have we tried to use nuclear weapons against them, or what have we tried to do?
To the best of my knowledge, and remember, I can only talk from the perspective of what I know about. I've never known them to try to use nuclear weapons or anything else against them like that. We may have, at times, tried to set off nuclear weapons on certain bodies in space, like the moon and planets, But the situation is, each and every time we've done that, something has happened to the nuclear weapon before it hit the planet.
Oh.
We have went ahead, we have had various types of testing we've done, and when we've done this testing, we have wound up having the weapon systems sometimes be nullified by our visitors just to show us what they could do.
Yeah.
There have been times when we were rattling war sabers, and they said, oh, you really want war? You really want to be the children in the room filled with gas and waiting to see which one of the kids are going to strike a match first. So they started our own they would start our missiles and get them within seconds before they would launch. That didn't just happen in the U.S., it happened also in Russia.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping real soon it happens in Korea.
Yeah. Are we able to bring them down? You hear people telling stories that we're able to bring them down. Are we able to shoot them down?
We have no technology that can shoot those UFOs down.
You're talking to the colonel. The colonel mentioned we have orders, we have rules. What's your understanding? Who's running the show? And
I'll tell you right now who's running the show.
Okay.
The Director of Central Intelligence. A lot of people think, oh, no. The National Security Agency came into play. It had a director. It was so secret. For decades, people didn't even know it existed. But who really controlled the NSA? The Director of Central Intelligence. The other thing is the National Reconnaissance Organization.
Okay.
The National Reconnaissance Organization was a by-name listing. At its first conception, there were less than 50 people on a list that even knew what the NRO was and what its purpose was.
Right.
You had thousands working there, but they did their little piece toward bringing it and making it into the function that it was supposed to be doing. But the whole situation is people were thinking, oh, well, it stands alone. No, it didn't. The Director of Central Intelligence Agency had control of that. When President
Truman?
forgive me, I have not gotten much sleep over the last couple of days, but when
You don't sleep at conventions. It's not allowed. What year?
oh, not Carter, but
Yeah, Reagan, Carter, Bush.
no, our blonde-headed guy that almost got impeached.
Oh,
can't-
Clinton.
Clinton, I don't
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't believe I drew a blank on that. But when Clinton went ahead and asked Bush to brief him at the time that Bush was
Okay.
Director of Central
Yeah.
Intelligence, Clinton went ahead and asked. He was president.
Yeah.
You know, you have supposed to brief him. He's in charge of everything. He's top man. What did Bush say? Bush said, Mr. President, no, you don't have a need to know.
Okay,
And-
so, but the question is then, if the president appoints the director of CIA, why would he not fire the director of CIA? Isn't that his guy?
Well, yeah, he sure is his guy. But if he goes ahead and fires him, he better go ahead and have the National Intelligence Security Board go ahead and approve it. If it doesn't happen, then he can't go ahead and release him. And, you know, our current president has a lot to learn. And are there directives that say that this is the case? Sure is. Just recently released, there are documents that make it clear that the president can't do certain things. And fortunately, you know, once again, among all that 17 million documents that they released, these are just a few of the documents.
Okay, how many
that make it
documents
clear.
have you got? I heard you got a lot of documents.
I got over 500 million documents.
So have you got, is there any place for your family to live other than the documents? That's
Well, actually,
Now, you've been collecting for years, so let's go
Oh,
through this.
yes.
And is there something new are you still looking for documents?
Oh, yeah, because I believe that, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, my name's Clifford Stone. I went into the U.S. Army in 1969. I've been involved with recovering UFOs that have crashed. I've been involved in briefing certain people on UFOs. Reluctantly, not on purpose. Now, what did I just tell you? I told you an interesting sidelight to my life, an interesting story. But that's it. It's just a story. What's going to validate the events? I'm not important. I'm just one of the factors involved in it. But what's important? The proof. Why? The proof is going to force the governments, not just the U.S., but the governments of the world to finally open up and state, we are not alone, that we have visitors that have been with us since the dawn of man.
Have you interacted with the government in terms of these documents saying to the government, we have this, and do you think the government's going to disclose? Do you think, because there's a story that the government is leaking this stuff out. Do you think they are?
I have been beating my head again, and they are. I mean, why do you think I have these?
Yeah, but have you contacted the government about this?
Yeah, I still have. They contact me, and I'm going to tell you, some of you people aren't going to believe.
Who's contacting you? Like, I mean, what's the highest level that you're dealing with? Are you dealing with someone in the government, or are they trying to help you get this stuff out?
They don't. Well, yeah, I have some people who actually try to help me get it out.
Oh,
and no, I'm not even going to say who any of these are because it could get them in trouble.
Okay, so you said this would maybe your last convention. So what are you going to do from here on in? Are you still?
I don't know. I've met a couple people while I was here. It's involved in the field that we're going to try to make sure that, I die. Hey, I'm just a passing of another person. The documents have to survive. The documents have to be where people have access to them.
So where are they going?
Don't know yet, but I've got some people that we're going to discuss this when they come down to my home in the UFO field that we're right here.
Wow. So you have some supporters,
Yeah.
some inside supporters in the government and in the UFO field.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you right now, I trust more. And don't get me wrong, there are some people in the U.S. government that really want this information to get out.
Yeah.
People say, okay, why is this information being kept from the public? Actually, there are two reasons. One, the United States government knows that I can say I'm not afraid, that there's nothing to fear.
Yeah.
That a lot of people can say that, but they can't speak for the entire world population.
Right.
So there are fear factors that will come into play. You'll have the situation where you'll have religion that comes into play.
Yeah.
So this has to be handled responsibly in getting the information out.
Okay. Now you've been part of the military. You've had this interaction
Yes,
with
sir.
the government. There's a lot of rumor in the UFO community that there's these evil people up there who are trying to cover this thing up. Your experience of the military and the government, are there evil people who are trying to destroy the world?
There's evil people up there because the whole situation is when you're in the intelligence community at a high level, you're not thinking about the right and wrong of anything. You're thinking about the technical applications and the technical superiority you can have in future wars. So the technology comes into play very quickly, and we want to use that. The mere fact that UFOs exist or are being seen, the mere fact that people have different concerns about UFOs, the United States has already figured out ways of using the UFO phenomenon itself as a matter of being used in a form of psychological warfare.
Yeah.
And we've even done that against the Soviet Union.
Okay, so we've got 1 minute left. You say this may be your last convention, talk to the people. You got 1 minute. Tell people what do they need to know, what's important, maybe give a message to the government, and maybe explain to me, what do you think the aliens, what are they here for? What's this all about in 1 minute?
They're here wanting to, they're here wanting to gain knowledge from us. We have a whole lot of knowledge we can gain from them. To the people here, you're not alone. There are other highly intelligent life out there in the universe. Keep an open mind. Let no one live in your mind rent free. And push for the truth. Demand the answers, but demand them logically and intelligently. By that I mean be armed with the documents that clearly show that there are things going on, that governments are covering them up, and we have nothing to fear, and it will be a much brighter future if we get the truth out. Truth will honestly set us free.
Beautiful. Thank you, Clifford Stone.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
You're a hero to the UFO community. Thank you.
I'm scared to death right now.
Beautiful. And hopefully you can come back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.